happy to welcome today's Saumini, urban planner and founder of Studio Commune in Trivandrum. While Saumini prefers to be referred to as only a human, for convention's sake and with her permission, may I add that she did a PhD from CET University, was Associate Professor at the College of Architecture Trivandrum, and Urban Planner at IIDC Limited. Currently, she's heading the department at Avani Architecture College in Wayanad, Kerala. Her conversation today is on theorizing and beyond, communing as an act of praxis. For all its academic sounding title, Saumini has indicated that it will be a casual conversation today rather than an academic presentation. Following the conversation, Saumini will take a few questions. So thank you once again, all of you, and thank you, Saumini.
Thank you so much, Vindiji. And thank you so much, Narendra, for this opportunity. And hi, everyone. I have a small presentation. I mean, in the sense, these are just pictures. And I thought I'll just take you through the journey of Studio Commune. So for that, I will just switch off my video. Otherwise, sometimes the bandwidth issues are there. I hope that's all right. Can you see me? Can you see me?
Yeah. We can.
So this whole idea of Studio Commune started with two human beings meeting each other and having kind of a relatively similar ideas and thought processes and lost in every ways, and also a dog. And we, three of us, the dog and both of us, myself and my partner Vishnu, we started to spend quite some time together. And the starting of Studio Commune was that point. So at that time, we were at Trivandrum and we were at Vizag. And we had a small space for ourselves, and we started spending a lot of time thinking about ideas of communing. What does commune mean? And commune not as a commercial venture of practicing architecture, but as a platform for us to explore things that we love to explore. So it started off as a collaborative practice, and it continues to do so. And the core of commune lies not just in practice, but also research and activism. But over a period of time, we have sort of realized that these three pillars that we are calling as practice, research, and activism does not really mean much, but they are not boxes in itself, but they are something that there are areas where all of them converge and diverge and intersect. So the core of everything that we do, just like how we are sitting now and talking to each other, are a set of conversations. Sometimes these are very, very lengthy. Sometimes it's just nonsense. Sometimes it makes a lot of sense, but after sometimes it just feels like it's a waste. But everything that every conversation that we have had sort of surrounds the ideas and notions of design, and how all of this put together becomes something that is worthy of being spoken about. So as I said, these are the three sort of intersections that we have. This is, and I was telling Narendra the other day that the more we go forward, the more we feel there's a lot being wasted, and this idea of being illiterate and having lost a sense of time, and there's much more to do, but one is unable to do. Probably it's got to do with COVID. I really don't know. But very recently, that's in this month, I think it was a couple of weeks back, I came across this recent issue of Architecture Review, and the the area that the Architecture Review has tried to capture this time is about waste. And I thought this rang, or it sort of resonated very well with what we are doing. So it really interestingly says that becoming a waste is a phase in the life of a thing. And for us, things could be more than just physical things, but could be thoughts, ideas. Sometimes even projects are wasted. Uh, and then it becomes a waste, then unbecome a waste as their components are mulched up or priced apart to be plugged back into the engine of progress. As our growing greed affects the production and processing of waste, we irreparably alter the lives of both humans and non-human species. And this sort of rings with what Commune has been trying to do, or at least what we have been trying to do, because at every point there's something that we are altering to the lives that's just not ours, but also the people around us, and also the non-human species around us. Knowingly, unknowingly, these have sort of become part of our everyday conversations. So the way we sort of function is there are certain projects we take up and under the banner of Studio Commune, and there are certain projects we take up as part of Commune. We really don't have a business model because sometimes our bank balances are really zero. And it's not really a model that's very sustainable, but in a sense of money, but it gives a lot of satisfaction about engaging with people and having these kind of conversations. Sometimes it could even be animals whom we have conversations with. So I'll just randomly you know take you through some of these projects that we have done. There are several projects that we have put the pictures about, but every project has a story and a set of conversations. So within the time that's given to me, I'll try to keep it as short as possible. So where we had our office, there was one Chechi who used to come and clean our office. Her name was Kala. And Chechi, for some reason, during the monsoon, for the first monsoon, she did not come to office for a long time. So we were wondering what happened to her. And that's when we called her, we didn't get through to her, but later got to know that her house was being flooded. So we went in search of her to find out what's going on with her. And that's when we realized that our house is right next to the small stream called Kili River. And this Kili River used to be one of the most prominent rivers in Trivandrum and has a historical past to it. A lot of cultural associations with respect to Padmatirtham Pond, and also with respect to Artigal Pongala, one of the major festivals in Trivandrum. But that's the point where we sort of realized that here is a water body which used to be one of the most prominent water bodies in Trivandrum, has now sort of become a backyard. And there's a lot of stories associated with this place, and it has sort of become today a hidden backyard. Not a backyard, but a hidden backyard, which is really not acknowledged by the people anymore. The sad part of this becoming of a backyard or a scarred resource is that these people like Kalachechi used to stay there as they had a dobi cart, and that's the job that they used to do. And they were dependent on the water for a very long time. And this water used to be used for cooking, for cleaning, for washing clothes and whatnot and whatnot. And a lot of conversations and cultural exchanges used to happen along this edge. But unfortunately, presently all of this has been emptied out, and all visual markers are gone. even access and spatial access of memory, or even the water as an agency. It's not there anymore. So, that's something that bothered us, and we started documenting these communities. This was not done for any agency, but it was just out of sheer, passion to understand what's going on. And that was also the time when Trivandrum Municipal Corporation was planning to do a cleaning drive for Kili. So they approached us and they asked, because you're anyway doing this, can you give us a plan to clean this place? So we said, okay, why not? And we started preparing this, cleaning schedule. But unfortunately, what happened was all of these materials that was pulled out of the water body, including plastics and medical waste and whatnot, they were all dumped on the sides of the same river, or sometimes even transported to the coast and dumped along the coast. And one day, the sea gave it all back to the coast of Trivandrum by dumping back all the waste that was once put into the sea or the river or whatever water body was dumped back on the land. So we find this as not just a conversation with the people, but also conversation with uh, these elements that really make our life so important on this planet. But while we were doing this project, and we were walking along the stretch of Kili, we came across this patch of land where the Chala Government School, it's a high school, I guess, was situated. Such a beautiful place. We were also introduced to this place by Tree Walk Group. It's a very, very interesting group that we have in Trivandrum, where they document trees across the city. And they're also a bunch of very enthusiastic activists who fight for the rights of trees. So while we were documenting the Kili River, we came across this patch, and we found that this is one place which was accessible to literally anyone. Anyone who lived there could just come and go for a jogging, or spend some time sitting and talking to each other. Children play there. Um, there are a lot of birds and a lot of animals. There are around 48 species of birds, actually. So there was this group called Waders and Warblers in 2014, I guess. They had conducted a survey, and there are around 48 species of birds, out of which I think 10 are really rare. And then butterflies and all that. So when we went there with the tree group at one point, we figured out that there is a project that the government of India, along with government of Kerala, and especially the education department, was planning to do in this particular land. This is also the floodplains of Kili, and used to be a brilliant agricultural patch, which was then later on given for the school. And the sad part was there were more than 25-30 rain trees here. And for this particular project, which is as part of the Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan, which is for the betterment of education of our children, they were planning to parcel out this rich land and construct a 3 to 4 story building, which would house some of these activities of Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan. And they were planning to cut down around 15 trees that were present there, which would definitely affect the biodiversity of this place. Not only that, it's not about just the plants or animals, it's also about people and their rights to open space in a city. Because in a city like Trivandrum, although it's comparatively green, especially in the Chala area, those who are familiar with that place, it's a commercial area. And this kind of a green lung is of extreme importance. So it's very sad that many of these activities that used to take place will no longer be there. So we decided to hold hands with the Tree Walk group, and I think to some extent Cosford was also part of this. And we try to work uh, with the local population in finding out an alternative site to this place. So we gave a report, we spoke to the officials, told them about these alternate sites that are there. And the condition of those alternate sites are also very, very sad, because some of them are abandoned. These are government lands, sometimes abandoned, sometimes full of waste. So why not use them? And why do we really want to touch these brilliant biodiverse spots in our city? We even try to develop a proposal for an urban biodiversity park, because there are several schools in and around this place, and we wanted these children to come, not just the children who are studying there, but also other children to also come, spend time, do their science projects, or put up an exhibition there, or play, spend time with their parents and family and siblings. And this then becomes that space where it's a common property to all. It is something that we can call ours and not to anyone particular. So we propose this biodiversity park, and we sort of spoke about hydrology walkways and butterfly gardens, and even science camping sites for the children, and herbarium and all that. Now all of this went on, and then the corona broke out. And I remember doing, I was teaching online to my students, semester 7 students at AVMI, Sustainable Architecture and Planning. And I got a call. Unfortunately, I couldn't pick it up. But when I called back, I was told that the trees have been cut down. And the protesters couldn't do anything about it. So today, some of these trees are gone. But while I'm talking to you, there is a group, the Tree Walk group, which is along with some other representatives. They are actually, putting down all that we have done so far to remind the authorities that whatever has happened, but this is what we lost. This is something we could have done. So it's a very emotional project, which is still ongoing, and I don't know what we could do. A lot of things, ideas were wasted, but I don't know, maybe it will be used sometime later. So apart from some of these, we also think while we are using materials. Although the construction industry produces a large amount of waste, sometimes it is possible that we can be a little more responsible. So in some of the buildings that we do, we try to incorporate these ideas, but not fully, definitely. It's challenging with the these are very small projects, and the clients they have a very limited budget also. So we cannot be very, very particular about recycling and all that, but we try to do what we can. So there are these small projects that we do as part of our practice, which also sort of are different kinds of conversation that go on. But sometimes we get opportunities to work on these lines of how do we create a home for everyone, and ask this most pertinent question: who are the real users of let's say a house? Is it just the people who live inside, or also those who make it a home, who need not be the residents within but also in the vicinity? So this is a unbuilt project. So my partner Vishnu, he comes from Alapi, and he is born and brought up in a very rural setting with lot of farmlands and animals and birds, and there's a very strong connection that he has with the nature that's surrounding his house, which is again a very old 200-year-old structure. So this particular project was in near Vembanad Lake, and as all of us know, it's one of the most ecologically sensitive areas. And this is one opportunity that we had to find out how a building can also be an organism. It's not just about building a product and finishing it off, but also it becoming a living, landscape. And this is actually for a doctor couple who was staying in the US, but unfortunately that was a time when one of the major storms affected their hospitals in the US, and they had to drop this project. But there was a very intense research that went into identifying the species and how each of them can be made part of this project. So I was just trying to, connect these different conversations that we've had over a period of time. Similarly, one attempt that we tried to do was in this small project that we had in Trivandrum called Nandan's Residence. So this is a story of a really long conversation we had with this friend Nandan, who was a professor at University of Kerala. Sorry, Kerala University, and he is a geologist, geographer. I'm not sure what is his specialization, but he's someone who works very closely with land and water. So we have had several conversations in the past, and he one day told us that, see, I have a small space. I have inherited that space, and I would like to, have something done with that place. You guys come and see and tell me what to do. So the story is that he had this space which he inherited, which was once part of a Nayar Tarvada, and he inherited the cowshed and the coconut store. And these are really small, narrow spaces. He's a bachelor, so he is very happy with the space that he has. But being someone who invites everyone home, for him, the entire world can come to his house and sit and chat with him. He has always told us, tell your students if they want, they can just come to my house and do whatever they want to do. And there's no issue with him. So he wanted a space where some of his friends could just come talk to him, speak about their dreams or ideas, maybe have a small drink, and they can just spend their time. And he has a brilliant collection of books also. And being someone who is a great lover of nature, not just humans, but everyone is okay there. Everyone's welcome there. He has a viper there. He has turtles there. He has, all kinds of birds coming there once in a while. And it's a very small oasis that we were able to work together on it. So this is a point where we actually thought building or designing is not about one architect or two architects sitting and brainstorming and drawing something, but building is an act of co-authorship. It's about everyone who makes it a building. So this project sort of brought out the idea of what does it mean by a refuge for people and for animals in a fabric which is so thickly populated. This is somewhere in Ayurveda College area in Trivandrum. So I'll just take you through the pictures here. So it was a very narrow lane. Nobody could really take their vehicle through this. So the one day the neighboring guys went and told him that, Nandan, you have to break down your building, pull it down, because we cannot take our vehicles inside. So it all started with this idea of how do you negotiate with those people, and from just chamfering that edge of that old 200-year-old building, it started from there, and then it went on to discovering ourselves and also discovering that friendship that we held with Nandan, and more about nature and more about people. It was just beyond all of, I mean, it's very difficult to put them in words. This is one of the pictures we took when we go there every 2 months and meet him and sit and speak with him, and look at all the plants that is grown there. So you can see on the left there is a fern that is growing. I'll show you some of the recent images. So there's a curtain that he had put outside, and we were like, "Why did you do that? It's not beautiful." And then he said, "No, one of my friends came and she was really scared of lightning, so I just put a curtain." So it just lives, it just keeps on growing. So this is a small courtyard space that we created here. And then this is a space where he could sit and write, and maybe guests can sleep, and this is how it looks like at the moment. I'm sure this would have grown. This was taken 2 months back, and there's a viper somewhere inside this, and he says it's very happy there. So from all of this, I mean, these are things that Studio Commune sort of engages with. As you can see, this doesn't fetch money or anything, but it brings out a lot of happiness, and it also gives us that push to explore much more. Also, as part of commune, these are our areas of passion. So we do these small things, like we do city walks in Trivandrum. We had to stop it almost a year and a half back because of the COVID issues. So the idea is commune is really not about us, but also the act of communing is also bringing everyone together and reaching out to them. So we identified people whom we have encountered at many points in time, who actually contribute to the city, who are not seen at all. They are these invisible population who sort of hold the city together. So whether it be from those carpenters who make some of the cheapest furniture in the world, maybe, from them to the toilet cleaners in the public toilet, to the street food vendors, to the people who sell second-hand books. We did a series of 10-15 walks, and even Killi Riverside was also one of our walks. So now this is not happening, but this used to be there at some point. But this also became a space for us to host people who had ideas. These are not people who are very proficient or who have a degree in oceanography or let's say architecture or anything. These are students. Sometimes people who, like, for example, this ocean literacy, the person who spoke was a fisherman who had done some hardcore research without having even a basic degree. So uh, there are these people who come together and sit, have a cup of tea. We ask everyone to come and have a katanjaya, which is black tea, and a vada with us for these attic talks. And this is again something that we did as part of our activism part of it, where we enacted this theater. It was a street play, uh, which did not really have a script. Only it's called Mutram, or urine, and it is all about just putting a urinal on one of the main spines of Trivandrum. So we had installed this one urinal there just to see how people interact with that urinal. It was kept there for a while and documented how people react to it. But it started off with a play, and we performed this in two, three places, but then we didn't continue that. So it's a very impromptu thing. We just start with somebody acting as a cleaner, but then soon it turns into conversations with the people who surround, and everyone starts sharing their experiences of using a public urinal or a public toilet, or even the lack of a public toilet. So these were some ideas of bringing in theater and a bit of acting and stuff like that into our practice. And then this was again on the streets when we were given some bricks and we were asked to make a brilliant installation. We just thought brilliance is also about the utility of it, and it should also be accessible to the birds and animals. And streets are not only for humans, no? It is also for everyone. So how can we make it much more democratic in that sense than just making it exclusively accessible to the humans? So that's one of our key ideas of connecting with other non-human creatures, and that's where our dog also comes in. So fortunately, we were able to connect with a bunch of youngsters in Trivandrum at that time to start something called Hands for Paws. It is about a group that would work for the betterment of street dogs, because we had a lot of street dog menace in Trivandrum at a point. It's around 2017-18 time, and a lot of culling of dogs were also happening in Kerala, and dogs were just considered as biggest shatru of humans, and nobody looked at them as yet another inheritor of this beautiful earth. So we started working with these bunch of advocates. They were psychologists, they were dog trainers, a lot of people, even veterinarians. And we were able to do small things, like even during the floods of 2018 and 19. So in 2018, especially what happened was a lot of people in Alapi, they have animals with them. They have dogs, they have cows, whatnot. So they just tied all of these animals when they left their homes when it started flooding, just thinking that they would come back the next day. Sadly, that didn't happen, and many animals lost their lives. So that was a time when we received a random call saying, my cows are there in my house. Please go and save it. There's nobody there. So then we called that person and we asked where it is, and we asked somebody from Alapi to go there. And then soon after, we started getting calls on about dogs and cats and birds, and so we thought maybe this is a time we need to organize ourselves. So we started a 24-hour kind of a service where a group of volunteers, along with one of our team members, they went to Alapi. We would receive the calls. We would transfer the calls to this person, and my partner, his house in the yard was converted into the rescue center, and we were able to bring in about 45-50 dogs, rescue them and bring them to his yard, and have all these birds, and and one of them actually his father adopted, so he's still there at home. So these are little things that we were able to do because of these conversations that took place. And that also grew with larger associations with organizations like PFA, or People for Animals. We had several brainstorming sessions on how we can make this city better for dogs and how we can spread awareness. So that's where this whole idea of a dog park came into being. So how can we use an unused space, unused land, a derelict land in the city or in every neighborhood, to be converted into a space that can be equally accessible to not just the breed dogs, but also the street dogs, and also have a puppy park, and how people and animals can come together, coexist and cohabit. But these are ideas, and to get this implemented is a tough task. So even these discussions went on for a long time, but uh, it never hit fruition. So these are again some ideas, wasted ideas, I don't know. uh, so one last part that I thought I wanted to discuss, or speak to you about was this idea of a building organ donation. So, as I said before, there are times when one feels extremely guilty about throwing away building materials, and all of us like our houses beautiful, so we renovate them. We reuse. We don't reuse. We just throw away things and buy new things, just like how even our wardrobes are today. So we thought, why do we do this? And that's a time when, again, very dear friend Ambika Chechi, who used to cook for us, she was having troubles with building a house for herself. So she used to come and tell us about all her financial difficulties and what the contractor used to do and how difficult it is for her to finish her house and all that. So one day we decided to go check her house. And that's when we realized that a lot of money was taken from her by the contractor, and not, they have not been able to deliver for the money that she has been spending. So we asked her to stop it, and we said somehow we'll manage. At that time in our mind it was about finding some money for her, but that's when we thought, what can replace money? Is it a I mean, in building industry, what maybe labor, but labor also needs a lot of money. In Kerala especially, labor charges are very high. So can materials replace money was then the question. So we thought, what materials can replace money? So that's when we thought of this idea of organ donation. So just like how you and I might pledge our organs and donate our organs when we die, why not a dying building? Why can't it donate its organs for a new building? So this was an idea. We went around collecting a lot of materials from architect's office, where these tiles samples were there. Sometimes people just throw it out. So we went, collected. So every weekend or something, we'll get an auto rickshaw, and we go collect these materials, take it to a house. And this went on for some time. So what you see bottom left was how her house was. And then even we got bricks, we got beer bottles, which is that's the one material that you will get a lot in Kerala. So we got all these bottles, got um, some of these, and even these paint cans which had little bit of paint in it, leftover paint. So all of these was done. And even the auto rickshaw, the driver, he was very sweet. He never took much money from us. And then we found a mason who agreed to do it at a very, very cheap rate. And a painters group was very, very happy to spend one day painting our house with a lot of volunteers. So all of this put together, we were able to actually finish that house with these building organs. So unfortunately, we lost Ambika Chechi after almost a year of this construction. But that spirit, it was uplifting for us, because if we could do one house, why not do more houses? So we tried doing this for one or two houses, and one of our friends gave us a yard where we could, store all of this. But unfortunately, he sold off that land, and then the corona came, and it was tough for us to, go ahead and collect these materials. So this is something that we continue to want to practice, of building organ donation. There was also a website that we had created where people could pledge their building organs, and we would go find out who they are, where they are, and go collect it from there and transfer that to someone who is in need of that organ. So yeah, that pretty sums up the kind of stuff that we do and the kind of conversations that we engage in. This is a very, very interesting quote that both of us came across very recently. It is about a dirty theory. So I'll just read it out for you before I finish this. So dirty theory is a reminder that theories are good for nothing unless they are bound by the muck of mundane relations on the ground, with the kind of environmental things that are increasingly at stake today, that are at stake yesterday too, and that certainly will be at stake tomorrow. Make a mud map, find your way through the dirt. The temporalities of the dirt takes us all the way from property rights to the call for the commons and return to the practice of communing, getting dirty together. So this is what we are doing, probably getting dirty together. So these are people who have been part of commune for a long time. We just have one person working with us now because of the COVID situation, but we hope to have all of you as part of commune. More and more people to come together and have longer and lengthier conversations, which will be more meaningful to the journey that we have started. So yeah, I think I'll end it here. Thank you so much, all of you.
Thank you, Saumini, for the wonderful presentation. I open the platform for questions and answers. Thank you. Waiting for the questions. Deepak is planning to ask question, I think. Yeah, Deepak.
Hi, yeah, sorry, I was just turning on the lights. Hi, so many very interesting presentation there. I also have to say it's been rather disturbing because I think we're all very used to seeing neatly done projects, and in the social sector, there's always this thing of impact and. But I kind of like the kind of trail of ideas which start off as conversations, continue as kind of a visualization, possible execution, and then poof, it's like either there or in parts or fragments. It reminds me a lot of also even what happens in social sector in terms of projects, and also in terms of design school ideas, and in terms of what students generate, and how the world that we live in kind of is very disenchanting for them once the space of ideas is taken away and they have to enter this very mainstream kind of career driven practice. So as practitioners, to see you kind of present this, even as architects, because I feel architecture and design have a close relation, but they kind of differ from the kind of design environments that I have taught in or I've been engaged with. And most recently, I did engage with an architecture school, and there was a lot of conflict in terms of how architects as designers saw output, so it's nice to see an architect present these kind of unexecuted or kind of very fragile and fragmented ideas. So that was nice to see. What really strikes me is that, I want to ask you, like, where would you locate this? Like, I know you're sort of presenting it to see how conversations can progress, and I also like the idea of nothing is wasted, but waste can enter another process and stuff like that. But if you were to be pushed to visualize or kind of how do I say, anchor this in some ways, how would you see some of these threads get anchored or used or utilized? I know I'm kind of coming from a counter idea where you have presented these fragments and you hope for them to kind of have a life of their own, or maybe die out, or kind of enter a composting process or a mulching process. But is there a kind of an aspiration to see it enter some kind of a process which will have a foundation and it'll build on itself? If so, what would that be? I hope I didn't confuse you, but I think you get what I'm saying.
Our entire journey is that of confusion, so it's absolutely fine. And this is one question, Deepak. Thank you so much for that question, because this is one question that we always encounter, because unlike several architectural practices where there is a product and very, very, very clear orientation towards what that product should be. I'm not saying that we don't have that. It's one of the streams that we work with. Sometimes we struggle with the client. Sometimes there is a real product in front of us. But the idea of how all of these threads can be brought together, and whether we have a very clear vision about where we want to take commune, to be frank, no, we really don't have. So that's where we are still banking on a lot of conversations to take place. So when students come to us and discuss about what are the possibilities of engaging with us, either there are existing possibilities of, let's say, workshops or even internships they do with us. Sometimes they also take a break from formal architecture education, and they want to sort of try out something. So we try to do these things that they find interesting and something that aligns with our idea of for whom is this world. And so, I mean, to be very frank, we really don't have any clarity as to what is it that one or two or three directions that we want to, take commune towards. We're just leaving it open for whichever direction it wants to take. And it is also not about just both of us and the dog. Because it's when the dog came into our lives that took another turn. Maybe tomorrow it's an elephant, I don't know. So it just this is something, it's a journey. It's without really knowing where the destination is. And in that sense, it's kind of a spiritual journey also, because the moment you know where you want to be, what is the fun in the journey at all? So yeah, so I would leave it at that. So if you feel that there is something that you would like to converse with us, maybe through your students, or maybe as a bunch of designers who are exploring something, we can definitely talk. So only thing that we are sure about is there is a door that is always open. We never close those doors. So anyone can enter and converse. If they feel comfortable, we can work together. If not, they're also welcome. So that's our idea at the moment, but there's really no destination for us. Thank you, Deepak.
Thank you.
Thank you, Saumini. Looking forward to other questions.
Narendran,
Yeah, sure. No,
it's not a question. I'm of course not an architect, or I may not know anything about architecture. I'm a layperson. As Narendran said earlier, we are two old humans living here after retiring. And last 3-4 years, we have been living in this place, and I could really relate our experience with what you have been explaining. And that we of course never thought of the environment we as a commune, but then we know very well that how important it is to have other organisms also as part of that. One of them which was already there before we lived in was a civet family on our, which has been quite disturbing for us. I mean, especially the smell that would give and all. Although it was nostalgic for some of us because our old homes, some of us would remember, had the civet visiting, and civet is considered to be, we are not supposed to even hurt that. And now we have one cat and 2 children, pussies, living with us. And one impressed me very well is what you said is that how we, especially during the COVID time, when we are all alone here, and how we started conversing with the cats. And to the extent that we are all even planning to sit together and develop a story out of it. Why a cat does certain things at certain time, and then why, and both the mother and the 2 pussies, they come and watch our television every day evening, and it is important to us. Sit in front of the television and start, looking at that, and to the extent it gave a slap to one of the politicians which came on the screen. I won't name the politicians, but then that image came. I don't want to extend it further, but what I wanted to say was we have the same problems like what you said about the river and what is happening to the rivulets and all these. The Mullacherry Canal issue is very much right. We live in that neighborhood in Cochin, in Karikamuri, through which the Mullacherry Canal and the Vivekananda Canal has all gone now. I mean, there is a new project being developed by a German project, I'm told, by the corporation, which we hope that would make a difference. We have flooding problems here and all this. So what I just want to express was we could relate with what you said very closely. What would happen to the commune, what we can do about that, and as 2 humans here, are we fully happy with what is happening around? We are not very sure. We have to adjust to that situation. Maybe that's how we have to go in an urban commune. We cannot be, what can I say, that only restricting and avoiding the cats when the dogs which go around shouting, and we are very afraid that if we leave the cat outside, the dog may catch and take it. It's very interesting. I'm sorry I took more time, but I really wanted to express this. Thank you. Thank you very much. I enjoyed your talk.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah. Any other questions?
Narendran, if I may speak.
Yeah, please, sir. Please go ahead. Suresh, please go ahead.
Hi, this is Suresh. I came in a bit late, so you were already in the, I think, on your 3rd slide. So my apologies for not listening in from the beginning. What really caught my attention was your the willingness to work with fragility, as Deepak also mentioned. I mean, that I think is a very important construct, because I think many of us, in our need for clarity, we transpose clarity for something else. I mean, I don't know what we transpose it for, but I think fragility is certainly not one of them. And as you rightly pointed out, life is full of these fragile moments where many things seed up to a point and might, fructify at a much later point in time if we are open to the idea of fructification not being within certain time plans. And I think that itself is opening up a certain fragility thought process in itself, because I mean we've gotten so constrained by time plans and ideas of quarters and weeklies and other kinds of things that I think the ability to think outside of that itself is frightening. And that was something that I picked up immensely from what you said. I mean, your willingness and your courage to work on so many things which in the broader construct might seem not fully worked with. Let me put it that way. But what is really what is not fully worked with, really? I mean, what we end up working with for the moment is the work that we have done for the moment, isn't it? I mean, so, and I think that you very beautifully brought it out with all the examples that you shared with us. I'm not an architect or a planner or any of those things, so I certainly don't have disciplinary strength to respond to many of the beautiful ideas that you shared. But as someone who hopefully thinks a bit, the way you narrated was something that was extremely refreshing, and thank you for that.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Suresh. Questions anymore? We have space for one more question.
It's just, I mean, question. I don't know whether it's a question or comment or whatever. Maybe Samini, we were really enjoying your, presentation. Thank you. And you may get a client because I have some ideas. We will discuss that later anyway. That's something I want to tell you. And actually, Kerala, I mean, especially after this 2018 flood and all, Kerala has been discussing about a design policy. And of course, a lot of architects groups, which is, they're floating around. But what I saw, what I've seen in all these discussions, actually, all these discussions are going around, how to build. But I think, I was analyzing some of the disaster management plan prepared by some of the panchayats in Kerala, especially Idukki district, even some rural areas. What I found actually, quite a lot of public spaces are empty because they were kind of listing all the buildings empty, which they can use for, in case of, evacuation or whatever, rehabilitation or whatever. So, but at the same time, the design policy discussion is always around how to build. But I think sometimes, people, architects, this is a very common man, like Suresh said, we don't have expertise to comment on that, but still what we feel as a layman perspective that, sometimes we also need to discuss how not to build. And I think Kerala, it's very important because the empty buildings, infrastructure, it's really, really high. If you take the houses, for example, it's 1.4 or 5 million houses are empty in Kerala. And also the other hand, we are discussing about like quarrying, sand, mining and so on. So I think this has a relation to that. So maybe, it's interesting to bring this aspect into the discussion which is going on, especially, the design policy and all. Thank you.
Thank you, Sumesh. Don't think of yourself as a client. You can just come and have a cup of tea and have a
But
conversation.
anyway. No, but I found some interesting projects in Bangalore. It's not a criticism, but still what I found actually some of the interesting projects are one of the most expensive projects in Bangalore. But if you really do a cost benefit analysis in terms of materials and all, they spend nothing, but it's really, really charged. It's like organic farming sometime, no? You can't really afford. Even though I'm really interested in such programs, but I can't afford. So, yeah.
Thank you, Sunil. Thanks a lot. Samini, thank you very much for this brilliant, very lucid narrative. Actually, I rather, like Suresh has been telling, it's a lucid narrative. It's a pleasant experience, and it's a pleasure. And I have one question. It's actually you're also trained in classical art forms, right? I know that actually because Kathakali and all. Do you see some of these cultural factors and their nostalgic remembrance and factors that is also influencing some of your work? And because it's some kind of a rootedness is there. I'm seeing actually whatever you do, there is a rootedness and longing for the basics is very predominant in most of your projects you people are doing. So do you think any role for such training? I'm as a teacher, I would like to ask such kind of trainings, does it actually affect the art and culture training? Does it affect the formation of thinking in these lines? when they become a future practitioner? Do you see anything of that kind in your life?
Narendra, I don't know how proficient I am in answering this question, but I mean, again, this is not just me. It's about a lot of people, a lot of animals, a lot of plants who are all involved in this what we call commune. So that's what I said. As you said, I might be trained in Kathakali. I've been a student of Patanaban Ashan for over 8 years, and sometimes get to do it once in a while when I get a chance to perform. But definitely, that training has opened up possibilities of exploring my own body and my own emotions, and contextualizing my body with space and the experiences that the space provides. So many of the explorations that I do definitely have some binding in the way I understand my body and my senses. Having said that, one will have to ask Vishnu exactly what Vishnu is my partner, so how he looks at this. And that's where his upbringing in the Alapi, that landscape, and how every organism is part of that landscape. So I think that's where I am unable, like what Mr. Deepak asked. It's very difficult to say who is influencing what idea of commune. It is about all of us contributing in some way or the other, in things that are manifested as a product or ideas that we generate. So I don't have an answer whether it is really important, whether that rooting, cultural rooting is really important. Probably yes, but for many it's an act of exploration. And for me, the body and senses are my core elements in my exploration as an architect.
Thank you.
Soumini, Narendran
Hello?
talked about the root, your inclination for rootedness. That very novel idea you have given, dwelling place as an organism. That is a very novel idea. I really congratulate you for giving such a novel idea. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Richa. Okay, thank you very much. I think actually we exceeded little time, but it's a beautiful experience today to be with you in this journey of, and looking forward to many more ideas and projects, and where many of us can collaborate also. Thank you very much.
Definitely, the doors are open.
Yeah. Deepak has a question also, actually, before.
Yeah.
Actually, I mean, more than a question, I just wanted to say that, I was reflecting on the discussion and the way it began, and what really I think is missing in terms of like in the formal spaces of thinking about, say, urban design, to put it crudely, or public space design is this kind of anchoring of conversations, because it's so ephemeral and it's so it's a part of the process, but you can't kind of tap it, and you can't kind of you can't kind of how do you say it, quantify it in that sense in terms of a process. And this is something I've been struggling with. So I was thinking of my earlier work also with public spaces and performance and theater, and then also working with communities. So there is something that I think that's valuable here, which I feel often gets only slotted in the experimental and exploratory space, and it's also very it's temporal, like it's kind of floating, and but I feel it has the potential to really how do you say tie it to social sector processes in terms of imagining public participation, public engagement with urban spaces, this kind of reimagining the city as a living being, moving away from the sort of the modernist kind of colonial idea of city, creating more porosity. So either in terms of discourse and in terms of these experiences, we have to learn to consolidate it, visualize it enough, also to be able to influence policy, like somebody was talking about policy here. So we have to try to do that, because I think those are the gaps, right? Because there are these ideas, and then it's just kind of placed in that idea space. But I think what I'm trying to say is that it has a lot of potential to be taken from there and actually put within processes which exist, to make them more porous and to make them more engaging. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Yeah. Wonderful.
Thank you, Narendra. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Have a very good evening.
Thank you, Salmini. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll come back to you. We'll come back to you if somebody want to collaborate and other things. We'll let you.
Sure. Anytime. Bye.
Thank you.